Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is the second session of Understanding Israel. We're going to be covering the recent Palestinian unity deal between Hamas and Fatah. Joining me today is Major Elliot Chodoff. Elliot is a major in the reserves and an officer in the Northern Command. He's currently getting his PhD at University of Haifa, where he also teaches classes on various subjects relating to Israel. Elliot, thanks for coming in today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So, as we've been reading in the papers, and we've seen that Hamas and Fatah are having another go at it again. It's a relationship with no love lost, but trying to make some love always. What can we, get from this? Is this real? Is this going to actually happen? Is this just another fake attempt, or is there some sincerity, you think, involved with the current mending of the relationship?
Well, it's difficult to predict what's going to come out of it. It's being driven now by two different forces from the two different sides. Hamas is a rising power in the West Bank as well. They've already taken over Gaza. So the PA, I think, understands rather well that if they don't go in with them, they're going to end up against them. Paradoxically, what's keeping Fatah and the PA in power in the West Bank is the Israeli military and its operation against Hamas. At the same time, Hamas is going into a period of uncertainty with what's going on with Syria. It's gaining power in Egypt, losing power in Syria. It's one of those things where probably from their point of view, better to be well anchored and in some sort of an arrangement with the PA. They can always break out of it if they come out ahead, but in the meantime, just sort of insurance in case they come out behind.
What's going on in Mahmoud Abbas's mind? I have to believe that he understands the ramifications of getting involved with Hamas. I mean, it was not so long ago that Hamas has made comments about being able to overtake the West Bank if given the chance. What does Mahmoud Abbas have to gain from doing this, if anything?
I think that for him it's a play to stay in power. If he opposes Hamas, he ends up out of power and possibly dead. If he plays with them, he stands a chance of possibly holding on long enough to retire gracefully.
Should we believe, though, that he's given up on, this, at least for pundits and people who are analyzing this on a regular basis, it just seems like it's almost a capitulation when he is getting involved with Hamas, that he's realizing it's not going to happen with him?
It's a total capitulation. But better to capitulate and be there after it's over than not to capitulate and end up in the ground, basically.
So what's going on in Israel with this kind of thing? Are they kind of saying to themselves, I don't know, we've seen this before, it probably won't last, so we'll just wait it out? Or, how is Israel strategizing, preparing, assuming that maybe it will work, especially in the wake of the Arab Spring?
Look, Israel's position is that if Hamas is in, we're dealing with a terrorist organization.
So does that mean that it will likely be cut off, that there will just be no negotiations as long as Hamas is involved?
That would be my guess. That's how I would see it. I think that's the way Bibi is playing it. There'll probably be back channel talks. We do have security cooperation, and as long as the security forces remain Fatah, we'll continue to work with them.
I also think I think a lot of people have given up on Bibi in terms of being able to make peace, and I'm leaning towards that camp as well. But is there any kind of reasonability that we could think that Bibi might be able to make something work, even if it is a unity government, or is he biding his time and the Israeli people are going to have to wait for someone else? I mean, I feel like a lot of this, we can sit here and talk about Hamas and Abu Mazen all day, and I don't think you'll find many people who disagree that there's no one to negotiate with Hamas. But what can be said about Bibi Netanyahu in this instance?
Look, I think Netanyahu actually has made strides. The Likud prime minister talking about a two-state solution 5 years ago would have been unthinkable. So I think he's moved toward what is understood to be the position. I think that he's seeing it completely differently. I think he understands that the one critical issue that Israel can't compromise on, the Palestinians have painted themselves into a corner in which they can't compromise either, and that's the refugee issue. And as long as the refugee issue remains a core to an agreement one way or the other, and it's a total non-compromise here, because I'm not talking about cosmetic 5,000, 10,000 refugees, family unification stuff. That's cosmetics. Israel can't absorb millions of Palestinians, and the Palestinians have been pushing very hard over the past few years to their own population that they will not compromise on the issue. In other words, everybody goes home when it's over. So,
is there any way with the Arab Spring going on that it could almost be a blessing for the Israelis? I know, one of the gripes is that Israel wants to have direct talks. They don't want to have third parties. They want them. That was part of the UN bid, was that we want you to talk to us directly. Is it possible with things like Syria and Iran is a little bit on the outskirts? They're kind of walking on eggshells as well. The Egyptians are having their own problems. The Libyans are having their own problems. Could this force the Palestinians to come to the table directly, or is it likely to make them, I don't know, more insecure, more unwilling, more willing to just wait it out? Is there any way that they could probably push to the table as a means of from isolation?
Look, if they want to close the deal, this could push them to the table. My view, and it's one that's developed, and it's not one that I thought 10 years ago, is that they really don't want to conclude the deal. They want to talk about talking. They want to make it look good. But the premise of Oslo, now we're going on 20 years almost for Oslo. The premise was that they wanted a state more than they wanted anything else. And compromise, move them in that direction, move them towards autonomy and possibly a state, and that'll solve the problem. And I think that what we've seen over the past decade plus, since the failure of Camp David 2000, is that they're doing just about everything they possibly can not to have a state.
Right.
Salam Fayyad maybe being the exception.
And what's happening with Fayyad now? I mean, he's being marginalized, it looks like.
He's being marginalized. So Hamas has said that they don't want to have anything to do with it.
It's because of he's seen as a Western-backed individual, but he's also largely responsible for a lot of the economic success in the West Bank.
Right.
And you would think someone like Gaza, whose employment is in the 30 percentile, I think, would want a guy like that who could stimulate the economy.
That's on the assumption, if you're thinking Western, that what they want is a stimulated economy and high employment. If you're a service-providing terrorist organization, it may be that you want high unemployment so you can keep people locked into your system. Okay, terrorist organizations don't support the middle class. They destroy the middle class because that's the opposition.
And they feed the fruit. They feed the hanging fruit to the poor so as to keep them stimulated and popularized.
Right. Here, I think that there's an error, but it's an almost correct error, that poverty leads to terrorism. That's not true. But poverty does lead to dependency on terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, which provide social services.
So what can Fatah, if Fatah is thinking a little bit more far-sighted, and this is kind of an issue, if this is a survival mechanism for a boss, what's the end game for Fatah? What do they hypothesize? What do they think they're going to get out of this besides merely survival? Are they just giving up on talks with Israel?
I think they gave up on talks with Israel as soon as they hardlined the refugee issue. They've been avoiding talks like the plague, and the reason they're avoiding talks, the whole settlement thing is a red herring. The reason they're avoiding talks is because they know very well that ultimately it's going to boil down to that, and they're going to have to say no, because that's the one issue where the West, and even the somewhat, let's say, the West that does not have a great affinity toward Israel, I'm not talking about, I won't call it anti-Israel, but not the non-pro-Israel West.
Sure.
Agrees with Israel on this one.
So what is Bibi's reaction to this? Besides saying we're not going to discuss with Hamas, how can an Israeli government now, and I believe that they think they probably need to re-strategize. If they don't re-strategize, they're fools. But how can they re-strategize? What is the next step, assuming this unity deal goes through, which I personally don't believe it is going to stick, because they have not provided us with any evidence in the past or in the current that it's in fact going to last, unless Fatah is literally just giving up. How can the Israelis strategize for something like this?
I think the Israeli strategy has run its course. I think that what's happened over the years is that Israel has reached the point where it's offered virtually 100% of what it can offer. You know, a little here, a little there, but the major stuff is out there. In other words, we've essentially agreed to 100% of the West Bank or equivalent. We've already given up 100% of Gaza. We've agreed to share Jerusalem. It's just a question of where you're going to draw the line. That's not strategy anymore. That's tactics. We've agreed to independence, and with all sorts of arrangements. But again, now you're talking tactics, not strategy. The only thing that Israel is absolutely not going to agree to on a strategic level is return of refugees. That's the only open question that Israel has not already taken to the limit. And that's the question that remains. So all the rest, I think, is maneuvering. It's tactics.
Okay. Elliot, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been very enlightening. I'm sure that we're going to have many conversations in the future about this. You know, as we all know, the circle is always coming full length in with the Israel and Palestine situation, and I look forward to having you in the future.
I look forward to it as well. Thanks.
Thanks so much.